Things have gotten so tough out there, the robots are unemployed. Hi, I'm Scott Ott with Stephen Green and Bill Whittle. This episode of Right Angle brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. And gentlemen, this story comes to us from the Wall Street Journal, reporting that SoftBank Robotics flagship robot, a little character we call Pepper, the iconic little big-eyed anime-looking robot, has fallen on hard times repeatedly. Apparently can't keep a job, tried everything, bouncing from one career to another and failing repeatedly. So far, Pepper, which is kind of a little white robot that's supposed to be able to help you to do things and to say things and to move his arms and stuff like that, has been fired from a funeral parlor, from a baseball stadium, nursing home, from a bank where he was supposed to be peddling financial services as a salesman there, and from countless consumers' personal service. And Stephen Green, there are a combination of factors at work here, including glitches in Pepper's hardware and software, downtime, difficulty keeping a cloud computing connection, failure to recognize people. In fact, one was having some difficulty, so they sent him off to the shop. And when he got back to the homeowner that is, supposed to be his master, so to speak, he said, "Nice to meet you." This was after they fixed his recognition software.
Yeah, you're not supposed to do the hard reset on that.
That's right. And then, of course, there's just the general creepiness factor, as was pointed out by one baseball fan who saw Pepper at a baseball stadium and said, actually a legion of Peppers, and said it reminded him of some sort of North Korean military parade. We had heard, or we have come to assume, that robots are going to replace all of us eventually. And yet it seems that this ingenious innovation that was introduced first in 2014, this kind of personal, the Jetsons' Rosie robot, is failing time after time to meet people's expectations. Why do you think that is?
Oh, there's a lot to dig into here, but I'm gonna try and keep this as focused as I can. I am no Luddite. I believe in progress. I believe in technology. I believe in automation, and that automation so far has mostly destroyed the most unpleasant jobs, and that's okay. And I'm not this callous kind of learn to code kind of guy. If there's a reason some of these jobs aren't being replaced, it doesn't have to do with the automation. It has to do with the political climate, and it has to do with the trade climate, such as putting our workers in competition with workers that are paid much less in third and second world countries. I think that's proven to be a huge mistake. But there's one thing you can't automate, because it's fake. It goes right to that thing of, sincerity. Once you learn to fake that, you got it made. You can't automate friendliness, because it's fake. Somewhere in your lizard brain, that robot doesn't actually like you. It's just doing what it's told. It's just following its algorithms. It's saying the nice thing. One of my favorite things to do, especially in the summer, is to give my wife more free time to work on her novel writing. Is I'll get my boys out on a Saturday, spend almost all day. And one of the things we do is we'll always go to lunch somewhere. There'll be some kind of activity. And oftentimes we will hit a local bar and play some cards, and the boys will have some sodas and I'll have a couple of beers, and it's a good time. And one of the lessons I've tried to teach them by example, I'm not explicit about this, is how to be flirty with your cocktail waitress without actually hitting on her. Because believe it or not, she has not been at work all day just waiting for me to show up to get hit on. No. But you also want to be friendly, and you want the waiter or waitress to be friendly back at you, because that's part of the fun of dining. That's part of the fun of going out. And you can't automate that. If a robot comes up to take my order and it says, "Hey, great to see you again, Mr. Green," I know it's not actually great for the robot to see me again. That's just what the algos told the robot to say. And you can't fake that. You just can't do it until robots have totally replaced us, at which point, they'll have to have a completely different conversation. But you said one of these robots was working in a funeral home. Even worse than automating friendliness. How do you automate that kind of empathy? The fact that these robots weren't apparently very well engineered or very well maintained through software updates, I think is the least of the problems. The problem at heart is that they don't have one.
Bill Whittle, these when they originally started selling these to individual people, they were going for about $2,000 a piece, plus a service fee. And one customer who had one of these for 3 years and eventually gave up was unable to get a refund of his some $9,000 that he had put into this this robot. And the thing just kind of is slumped to get it against his refrigerator at home, useless. But businesses were paying anywhere from $550 to $900 a month to have the kind of subscription service that you had to have to make these things work. And I think there's something fundamentally different about saying, manufacturing assembly lines have gone the way of robotics a long time ago, and most of that, or a lot of that kind of work, is being done because, if an arm comes out and fastens a lug nut on, that's one thing. But to have a robot at a hotel desk and try to make somebody feel welcome, that's something different. Do you see in this story, Bill, kind of a hopeful sign for those of us who are in careers that don't involve putting lug nuts on?
No. Well, first of all, about the guy who put $9,000 into this thing and wouldn't get a refund. If you have a product and somebody's not happy with the product, you should refund their money, all of it. Offer does not apply to membership-based resources. Check your states for local details. But it's an indication generally, that of how a company is run. And look, it's obviously just not a very good robot. And Steve's right. You cannot generate sympathy, but it is a sympathy robot. And using my advanced sense of the theatrical and the ridiculous, which I was born with and didn't have to work too hard to obtain, I looked at this picture of the robot when you first mentioned it because I had not been aware of the travails of Pepper. And I took one look at this robot and said, I wouldn't want that thing in my house. And I can tell you why. And I could tell you one thing we could have done to make this robot successful. I'm not joking about this either. They gave it anime eyes. Big anime eyes like this, This is what's Japanese robots, so that's kind of expected. I'm not joking now. If instead of those eyes turning up, if those eyes had turned down like they did with Wall-E, Wall-E is a moving toaster. And the genius of really great storytelling and great animation and great understanding of the human psyche is, if you watch Wall-E, there's a moment in that movie when you realize that a toaster has just stepped on a cockroach and your heart stops.
Yeah.
And that's not an accident. There's been the guys who did the Red Letter Media reviews of Star Wars took a look at Avatar and the skill that James Cameron used to build the face of the Na'vi, right? Big eyes, small nose, roughly feline features, but no visible teeth or claws or anything, mostly the big eyes. If they had turned those eyes down, then you would have had a somewhat sad-looking robot and not a weird-looking robot who was like looking so hard to please you. So those little things are things I noticed. But the bottom line is it's a crummy piece of plastic. Now, what they should do with these things is they should put them into the Boston Robotics gladiatorial cages and have the Atlas robots smash them to pieces with hockey sticks. Now that, as Steve pointed out in our backstage show, he'd pay good money to see. I would too. Yeah. But, Scott, you just take a look at the design. I'm interested in the design of things. And there's only one word that comes to me when I look at Pepper, and that is it is overly precious.
Yeah.
It's overly precious. And that's not going to work. You can make a robot kind of a friend or a toy. I ought to know because I grew up with one my entire life. I thought the robot on Lost in Space was my friend. And the Lost in Space robot was my friend was because he wasn't trying to look like my friend, Yeah. He had a bubble head. He had claws. He had nothing resembling a face or even eyes. He just had personality. And as as you can find from watching a Quentin Tarantino movie, personality goes a long way.
My overall impression of the look, as Bill, you're talking about that, the advice I would have given to the designers is try to make Pepper look a little less stabby. I'm pretty sure that Pepper is going to stab me to death in my sleep. I mean, just
that's right.
When you see that face, you're like, oh yeah, like that's sincere, right? Like something's hiding there within. The reason why I think an organization would even entertain the notion of putting a robot in a customer-facing position beyond just the cutesy novelty of it, like you think you're in Disney or something and seeing some entertainment. These are actual experiments to see if they can ultimately replace people in these roles. And the reason why anybody even wants to spend millions of dollars developing something to put people into these roles or to put robots into the roles of people who are doing this customer-facing work, is that we now have people in these roles who act like robots. So if you have a whole legion of so-called customer service representatives, whether on the phone or across the counter at the place of business, who behave as if they're merely programmed by an algorithm and reading a script and delivering it in a flat monotone, well, naturally you'd start thinking, well, I could probably invent a toy to replace this because there's no human personality to it. So those of you who are concerned that maybe someday you'll be replaced by robots, if you're tightening a lug nut and you haven't yet been replaced, you are going to be replaced by a robot. You need to find a way to inject your personality into whatever career it is that you pursue so that no robot could ever match you. There's a guy in the Wall Street Journal story who talks about the difference between Pepper and a human in this situation is like the difference between a car and a toy car. And Pepper is the toy car, and nobody thinks that the toy car is a car. And that will continue so long as humans are able to distinguish themselves by being, human. Try it sometime. It might work for you, and maybe you'll make more than $15 an hour if you stop acting like a robot. I will confess that this week, for the first time in a long time, I just absolutely lost my cool on the phone with somebody because he kept interrupting me and reading from his script, and he wasn't listening to me. And I finally just kind of flipped out and said, stop, you must stop speaking.
I didn't take it personally.
You are not, that's right. You are not answering my question because you didn't even hear my question. You're just reading the next line in the script. And I hung up on him. And when you get off that kind of phone call, you're like, yeah, where can I order one of those peppers? I mean, that doesn't sound that bad by comparison to this guy who I was just talking to. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the very human members at BillWhittle.com who make this possible.